Now, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback and sort of say, I told you so when you see this disaster develop out in California. But a lot of the people who are saying, I told you so, are actually pulling up the videotape and saying, no, no, really, literally, I told you so. We start with Joe Rogan.
I talked to a fireman once. This is one of the reasons that freaked me out. And he was telling me, he goes, dude, one day, he goes, it's just going to be the right wind and fire's going to start in the right place and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean. And there's not a fucking thing we can do about it. I go, really? He goes, yeah, we just get lucky. He goes, we get lucky with the wind. He goes, but if the wind hits the wrong way, it's just going to burn straight through LA and there's not going to be a thing we can do about it. Because these fires are so big, dude. When they're talking about like thousands of acres that are burning simultaneously with like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And the wind's just blowing embers through the air, and those embers are landing on roofs, and those houses are going up, and they're landing on bushes, and those bushes are going up, and everything's dry. And once it happens in a way where it's so spread out that there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do.
You just have to evacuate, right?
Nothing.
And that's exactly what we're seeing happen tragically, sadly, horrifically. When we went to sleep last night, we saw fires start on the Hollywood Hills. Yeah, the hills right where the famous Hollywood sign is and the Griffith Park Observatory. They had to evacuate people in the Hollywood Hills down to Sunset Boulevard. That's the center of of urban living in the west side of Los Angeles, and they had to evacuate people in Santa Monica as well, right up to the coastline. It's terrifying. It truly is. And yes, everybody saw this coming. There's something about Los Angeles and California in general where people feel like, oh, well, we figured out what the problem is with these fires. Let's fix this one thing and then we'll move on. I was a kid in the 80s when there were fires, really bad fires, devastating fires. And you've seen these scenes right now where the fire is moving from house to house and like the palm trees, the ember flies to the palm tree and the palm tree catches on fire and then the fronds burn and then the frond falls on the roof and eventually starts to catch that house on fire. And I remember back in the 80s when I was a kid in California, we had these fires and the roofs at the time, you can look this up, fact check it, this is all true. The roofs in most of the California homes were made out of wood shingles, wood shake shingle roofs. Believe it or not, the shingles were basically dried out chunks of wood. And they used them because aesthetically they looked beautiful. But funny thing about dried out wood as your roof, it catches fire like, dead wood does. And these houses, I mean, the fires would just bounce from house to house and the roof would become an inferno. And so California saw this and California said, well, we got to stop that. We got to fix that. So they came up with a new law that outlawed wood shake shingles. And now if you want to have that aesthetic look on your roof, you got to buy these ceramic tile shingles that look like wood shake shingles, but they're really ceramic. And they won't catch on fire like wood does, and see problem solved. And that's literally what people thought. Oh, there you go. The problem was the shingles on the roofs. Problem solved. Let's move on until 5 years later, the Santa Ana winds come again. And any semblance of leadership right now in California, if you say, what are you going to do about these fires? All they say is, well, we got to ban automobiles and we've got to sign the Paris Climate Accords. And we've got to stop using coal for energy. And we've got to install more solar panels and wind turbines. And that's the way we solve it, because they're all blaming it on greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? And I tell you something, you could today, if you could snap your fingers like it's, Avengers Endgame, snap your fingers and every single carbon dioxide emitting device in this planet, every car, every plane, every barbecue grill, every farting cow, every single thing stopped, you're still going to have forest fires. Do you know how I know? Because we can tell through archaeological discoveries that there were devastating forest fires before anybody figured out that fossil fuels could burn and run an engine. Okay? Fires have been around forever and they'll continue. And I saw a stat today, 2 days of these fires in Southern California, 2 days, because look at the picture on the right there. Do you see all that stuff in the air? You see all that stuff? Guess what that is? Those are greenhouse gases. Those are carbon dioxide emissions. That smoke, everything that's burning, in 2 days of fires in Southern California, you have emitted more carbon into the atmosphere to create greenhouse gas effect than an entire year's worth of cars in the state of California. It's really every time a politician tells you that the problem with these fires is climate change and the way to fix them is to pass more regulations, you have every right to throw something at the television. Don't break your TV. But you should mock them. You should laugh them out of the room. And if you actually ask fire professionals, and by the way, I'm not saying that climate change, however you want to describe that, is not a factor here. Yeah, likewise, if a politician says this has nothing to do with climate change, well, no. The fact of the matter is, if we are stuck in a weather pattern right now where every few years we have tons and tons of rain in California, and that creates huge amounts of overgrowth because of all that rain. And then you have 3 years of arid, dry desert conditions, and that kills all of that growth that was just growing because of all the rain. And now it's just dead and brittle and dry. And then a fire starts. That's a recipe for disaster. Now, we can argue about what caused those weather conditions, what caused all the extra rain, what caused all the dry conditions. I don't care. You may think it's greenhouse gases. You may think, I don't care. That's a whole other argument. The bottom line is, this is what's happening. So what do you do about it? And no one in California seems committed to the fact that if we've got all this undergrowth and then it dies, we need to clear it out so that it doesn't catch on fire. Or if it does catch on fire, it's not going to create an inferno like this. And for decades, they've just allowed this to happen. For decades, they've allowed it to happen. And yes, it is lazy politicians. It's also politicians whose fundraising is reliant on these insane environmentalist groups that only want to ban cars because they think that's the solution to everything. Also, by the way, it's these environmental groups that go to court and sue and try to block everything, even when the Democrats, and they have had their moments, when they say, we got to do something, we got to clear all this brush and we got to go to this. So let's say, here's our plan to do it. Then they're sued by these environmental groups, and then a judge comes in and makes a settlement, or the Democrats then decide, oh, well, we don't want to fight them because they give us all our political contributions, so we'll just settle. But the bottom line is nothing gets done, and it continues to perpetuate. And as Joe Rogan just said, you ask any professional, you ask any firefighter, you ask anybody who knows this stuff, and they'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you what will stop it. You ever wonder why this is almost exclusively California? It's not like Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada and other Western states don't have similar conditions. Why is it only California? And don't say, oh, well, because California is a desert. You're right. Southern California is. Northern California isn't. And yet we have fires in Northern California too. Why is it California? Why? Well, part of it is what I just described with regard to the rains and the brush and the growth, and then it dies, and then it becomes fuel for these fires. Part of it is because of the Santa Ana winds that come in from the desert. But there's another part of the equation too. It also points back to land management, water control, Democrats, and these environmental groups who sue the state of California. And that's where Donald Trump predicted this. This was during the campaign. This was in October, right before Election Day, when he sat with Joe Rogan, and he told the story about how he was trying to force on California some sort of quid pro quo. You want to keep getting federal disaster money to bail you out when you've got these fires? All right, fine. You're Americans. We want to help you. But in exchange, you've got to do something proactively so this doesn't keep happening. So let's start trapping all of this fall off, this rainwater, put it in reservoirs so you don't run out of water during the fires. And what happened then? Take it away, Trump.
They said, we have no water. I said, do you have a drought? No, we don't have a drought. I said, why don't you have no water? Because the water isn't allowed to flow down. It's got a natural flow from Canada all the way up north. Water, more water than they could ever use. And in order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. I could have water for all of that land. Water for your forests. You know, your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You know, you could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. And all they have to do is clean their forest, meaning rake it up, get rid of the leaves, get rid of, leaves that are sitting there for 5 years. And
We'll certainly get rid of the dead fall.
And get rid of the trees that are fallen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they predicted it. They saw it coming. They explained exactly why it was happening, and now, sadly, here we are. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, but it's not a natural tragedy, and it's not a tragedy handed down from God. No, it is preventable. It is. I'm not saying the forest fires aren't going to happen. They have always happened, and they will continue to happen, but not like this. And it's not more extraordinary because of climate change. This is a man-made disaster. And by the way, it is preventable if we actually have a government that works again. And what's amazing to me, and it continues to blow my mind, is traditionally Democrats would be all over themselves, so excited about a big government program that spent a lot of money hiring a lot of people to go in and do forest management, mitigation, and these are good public works projects that only the government can do. And that's who we are. We're Democrats and we do those things, but they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because that's how beholden they are to their new religion, their climate change religion. And they've decided that continuing to run in front of the cameras and say it's climate change and accuse and blame Republicans and Trump for all of this, instead of actually doing something to fix it, that it's more politically viable for them. And you know what? Up until now, it has been. People die, people lose their homes, the land gets devastated, but they keep winning election. So, I mean, I guess they're right. And the fact is now we've got Republicans in the place of saying, you know what, there's a role for government here. This is a good project for a government to handle. And yes, it's going to take money, but it needs to get done because only government can do it. And so we will. It's an amazing thing to see. And well, this is an opportunity for Republicans to actually show that they can get it done. And it will start with the federal government. It'll start with Donald Trump.